Sit down for this one because we need to talk about the thing nobody warned you about when you started your savings journey. You did everything right. You built the emergency fund. You stopped the impulse target runs mostly. You have a savings app that rounds up your coffee purchases and drops the change into an account with a cute nickname like Future Me. You feel proud every time that number ticks up by $11.40. And yet, somehow, you still don't feel rich. You still feel like wealth is happening to other people. Other women. The ones with the quiet luxury wardrobes and the passive income, and I work because I want to work, not because I have the energy. Here's the truth nobody says out loud. Saving money was never going to make you rich. Not because saving is wrong, but because saving was never designed to build wealth. It was designed to keep you safe. And somewhere along the way, we confuse safety with wealth, and that confusion has quietly cost an entire generation of women their financial future. Let that sit for a second. Because if you grew up watching the women around you clip coupons, stash cash in envelopes, and whisper about not touching the savings, you learned a very specific lesson. You learned that money is something you protect. You did not learn that money is something you deploy. And those are two completely different relationships with wealth. Think about the woman who has $18,000 sitting in a savings account earning less than 0.5% interest, feeling accomplished, while inflation quietly eats 3 or 4% of that value every single year. She isn't broke. She isn't reckless. She is, in the most technical sense, losing money while feeling responsible about it. That is the cruelest kind of financial trap because it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like virtue. Now picture a different woman. Same income, same background, same discipline. But instead of only saving, she took a portion of that same $18,000 and put it into an index fund, a retirement account, maybe a small stake in a rental property with a partner, maybe shares in the exact company she buys from every week. 10 years later, her friend with a padded savings account still has roughly the same buying power she started with. This woman has an asset that has been quietly working, compounding, multiplying, while she slept, while she dated, while she took maternity leave, while she lived her life. That is the entire conversation. Saving protects money. Ownership grows it. And most women were only ever taught the first half. Let's talk about why, because this isn't an accident, and it isn't your fault. Historically, women were taught financial caution, not financial ambition. Be careful with money. Don't take risks. Have a rainy day fund. Meanwhile, men were far more often taught to invest, to negotiate, to take calculated risks, to think in terms of ownership and equity. Multiple financial literacy surveys over the last several years have found that women report significantly less confidence in investing than men, even when their actual investment returns, once they do invest, tend to outperform men's, largely because women trade less impulsively and hold longer. So the issue was never competence. It was access, encouragement, and permission. Add to that the soft life era we're living in right now. Quiet luxury, clean girl aesthetic, rich anti-energy, girl math, dopamine spending. These trends aren't shallow. They're actually revealing something deep about how women are trying to reclaim comfort after years of hustle culture burnout. But here's the part that doesn't get said enough. Enjoying softness and building wealth are not opposites. The problem isn't that women want a beautiful life. The problem is that many women are funding that beautiful life entirely through depreciating assets, cash that sits still, and spending that disappears the moment it's spent, instead of also funding it through appreciating assets that pay them back. Imagine her, 29 years old, works in marketing, lives in a one-bedroom apartment in Austin with the exact kind of neutral, expensive-looking decor you'd screenshot from Pinterest. She has a $5,000 emergency fund she is very proud of. She also has $4,000 in credit card debt from a European trip, a car she leases every 3 years because owning is annoying, and a skincare routine that costs more monthly than her retirement contribution, which is currently zero. She isn't a bad person. She isn't financially illiterate. She is a woman who has been fed one half of the money conversation, the saving half, and never given the second half, the ownership half. Clock it. This is the soft girl economy trap. You can have the candles, the blowouts, the quiet luxury tote. But if none of your money is buying you equity, ownership, or income that arrives whether or not you show up to work. You are decorating a life you don't actually own the foundation of. So, what does the ownership half actually look like in real, unglamorous terms? It looks like understanding the difference between an asset and an expense disguised as an investment. A high-yield savings account is not building wealth, it's preserving it, and even that is being generous, since most savings accounts don't beat inflation. A retirement account with automatic contributions into a diversified index fund is different. That is ownership. You now own a tiny sliver of hundreds of companies, and when they grow, you grow. It looks like understanding that a 401k match from your employer is, quite literally, free money that most women leave unclaimed because nobody ever sat them down and explained it in plain English. If your company matches contributions and you're not contributing enough to get the full match, you are handing back a raise you already earned. It looks like understanding that a Roth IRA is one of the most quietly powerful tools available to a woman building long-term wealth because the money grows completely tax-free, and unlike a savings account, it isn't just sitting there being polite, it's actively invested and multiplying. It looks like understanding real estate not as the house I dream of one day, but as a system. Even without buying property yourself, real estate investment trusts let a woman own a stake in commercial real estate, hotels, apartment complexes, with far less capital than most people assume. And here's a mindset shift most financial content never says clearly enough. You do not need to choose between spending on your life now and building wealth for your future. You need a percentage system, not a personality overhaul. Something as simple as directing a fixed percentage of every paycheck into ownership assets before a single dollar touches your everyday spending. Not because budgeting apps failed you, but because willpower was never a real financial strategy to begin with. Automate the wealth-building part of your life, so your future doesn't depend on whether you're in a disciplined mood on a Friday night. There's a psychological layer here too, and it matters. A lot of women unconsciously associate investing with masculine energy, aggression, risk, cold spreadsheets, finance bros yelling about stock tickers. That association keeps brilliant, capable women out of the exact rooms where wealth compounds. But investing isn't aggressive. Investing is patient. It's actually one of the most feminine things you can do with money, in the sense that it rewards patience, intuition about timing, long-term thinking, and emotional regulation, all things women are, on average, remarkably good at. The data backs this up. Multiple large-scale studies on retail investing behavior have found that women investors tend to trade less frequently and panic sell less than men, which over long time horizons actually produces stronger average returns. So if investing rewards patience and emotional steadiness, and women statistically show more of both, the real question becomes why more women aren't in the room. And the honest answer is that nobody handed them the invitation. If you're the kind of woman who wants to understand the psychology behind money, status, and the quiet decisions that shape a financial life, subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of conversation we go deeper into every time. Let's talk about emotional spending for a second because it's tangled up in all of this, and pretending it isn't would be dishonest. Picture the late-night scroll. 2 a.m., can't sleep, thumb moving through an app without even really looking. A candle here, a dress there. A serum promising to undo a decade in 6 weeks. None of it is really about the candle. It's about control. It's about needing something to feel certain in a life that currently feels uncertain. Emotional spending isn't a discipline failure. It's a nervous system asking for comfort in the only language it currently knows. The mistake isn't feeling the urge. The mistake is never building a second outlet, an ownership habit that gives the nervous system a different kind of reward. Watching an investment account grow, even slowly, produces its own quiet dopamine. It just takes longer to feel it, and we live in a culture engineered around instant gratification, which is precisely why most women never stick around long enough to feel it. This is the part that separates the women who eventually become financially powerful from the women who stay financially anxious forever, even while doing everything that looks responsible. It's not intelligence. It's not income. It's whether a woman shifts her relationship with money from protection to participation, from guarding what she has to actually owning pieces of the economy around her. Consider two friends, same starting salary, same city, same age. One puts extra money into savings every single month for 15 years. The other puts a smaller amount into an index fund every single month for the same 15 years, alongside a modest savings cushion. Assuming an average historical market return, the investing friend's money will very likely have grown to multiple times what she contributed, while the saver's money will have grown by roughly what she contributed, minus what inflation quietly took. Same discipline, same sacrifice, wildly different outcomes. That gap isn't talent. It's information. And this is where the soft life philosophy actually gets interesting because done correctly, it isn't in conflict with wealth building at all, it's the reward for it. The woman who owns assets is the one who eventually gets to choose a soft life on her own terms, not because a partner is funding it, not because she's one emergency away from panic, but because her money is quietly working a second job for her in the background while she lives beautifully in the foreground. There's also a relationship layer to this conversation that deserves honesty. So many women have been taught to be financially attractive to a partner rather than financially independent as a person. Being financially attractive matters, sure. Nobody's pretending otherwise. But building your own ownership stake in the economy changes the entire dynamic of every relationship you're in, romantic or otherwise. It removes desperation from the equation. A woman with her own assets doesn't stay in a relationship because she's financially trapped. She stays because she wants to. That single shift changes everything about how love, partnership, and even boundaries operate in her life. So here is the practical transformation, stripped of complexity. Start by naming the difference out loud, to yourself right now, between your saving and your owning. If most of your money is sitting in cash, that's protection, not growth. Then pick one ownership vehicle, a retirement account, an index fund, even a small brokerage account, and automate a percentage of every paycheck into it before you see the money in your checking account. Not a huge percentage. A real one. Something that hurts a little, but doesn't wreck your soft life. Let it run untouched for years, not months. Wealth building is boring in real time and only feels exciting when you look backward at it a decade later. And give yourself permission to still enjoy the candles, the trips, the quiet luxury tote. This was never a call to deprive yourself into wealth. Deprivation doesn't build financial freedom. Ownership does. The goal was never to choose between softness and intelligence. The goal was to finally let your money hold both, the way you always could. Because here's what nobody tells you when you're 25 and proud of your savings account. Rich isn't a number you eventually save your way into. Rich is a relationship you build with ownership, patience, and time. The women who look effortlessly wealthy later in life almost never got there by guarding every dollar. They got there by quietly, consistently, owning pieces of something bigger than themselves, long before anyone was watching. Let's go even deeper into why this pattern repeats itself across generations, because understanding the root of it is what finally breaks it. Think back to the women who raised us. Many of them lived through decades where financial independence for women wasn't even fully legal in the way we assume it was. Up until the 1970s, a woman in this country could be denied a credit card in her own name without a husband co-signing. That's not ancient history. That's a single generation ago. Our mothers and grandmothers were handed a survival playbook, not a wealth playbook, because for most of their lives, survival was the actual assignment. Save what you can. Don't rely on money that isn't guaranteed. Keep a cushion in case the marriage ends, the job ends, the man leaves. That advice made sense for the world they lived in. It simply was never updated for the world we live in now, a world where women can invest, own property, build businesses, and hold assets entirely in their own name, without asking permission from anyone. So when your instinct says, just keep saving, that feels safest, understand that instinct is inherited, not necessarily accurate. It was built for a woman with far fewer legal and financial options than you currently have. You are operating with tools she never had access to, but sometimes still following a rulebook written before those tools existed. Now, let's talk about the internet's role in all of this, because it cuts both ways. On one hand, social media has done something remarkable. It has normalized women talking openly about money in a way that would have felt almost scandalous a decade ago. Women comparing salaries, breaking down their investment portfolios, explaining what a Roth IRA actually is in 60 seconds flat, dismantling the old etiquette that said discussing money was tacky or unfeminine. That shift alone has quietly transferred financial literacy to millions of women who never would have received it otherwise. On the other hand, the same platforms that taught us about index funds are the ones selling us the exact lifestyle that makes saving for those index funds feel impossible. Every scroll is a curated highlight reel of a life that looks effortless and expensive. The trip, the blowout, the bag, the apartment that looks like a hotel suite. And here's the part that stings a little. A lot of that lifestyle isn't funded by wealth at all. It's funded by debt, by brand partnerships, by financing, by a version of abundance that exists for the length of a 15-second video and nowhere else. When you compare your real, unfiltered financial life to someone else's edited highlight reel, you're not just making an unfair comparison, you're making a comparison against something that in many cases isn't even real. This is where the phrase Delulu actually earns its keep, in an unexpected way. A little delusion about your own potential, believing you can build real wealth even starting small, is healthy. But delusion about other people's finances, assuming everyone around you is quietly rich because their content looks rich, is the exact thing quietly sabotaging your own progress. Clock the difference. One delusion builds you up. The other one makes you feel behind in a race that was never real to begin with. Now, imagine a woman in her late 30s, a stay-at-home mom, who spent a decade out of the traditional workforce raising 2 kids. She sometimes feels like the wealth-building conversation isn't for her, like it belongs only to career women with steady paychecks and stock options. That belief is one of the most costly financial myths circulating right now. A woman without traditional income can still build ownership through a spousal IRA, through jointly held investment accounts, through negotiating for her contributions to the household to be recognized financially in shared assets, not just emotionally acknowledged in passing. Financial ownership was never meant to be reserved only for women with a W-2 and a corner office. It was meant to be available to any woman willing to claim her seat at the table, whatever her income situation looks like. And then there's the career woman on the opposite end, the one who did everything by the book. A good degree, steady promotions, a title with actual weight behind it. She still finds herself exhausted, staring at her paycheck the day after it hits, wondering where it all went, because a high income without an ownership strategy is just a bigger version of the same trap. Lifestyle creep is real, and it is patient. Every raise quietly gets absorbed into a slightly nicer apartment, a slightly nicer car, a slightly more expensive version of the same routine, until years pass and despite earning significantly more, she owns proportionally the same amount she did when she started. Income solves visibility. It does not automatically solve wealth. Only ownership does that. So here's an intelligent, specific framework, not a vague suggestion to just invest more. When a raise comes in, before your lifestyle has time to notice it exists, redirect at least half of that increase directly into an ownership account. You keep the other half to genuinely enjoy because deprivation was never the goal. This single habit alone, done consistently over 10 or 15 years, is one of the most powerful quiet wealth builders available to any woman, regardless of her starting income. When an unexpected windfall arrives, a bonus, a tax refund, a gift, resist the urge to treat the entire amount as fun money that appeared out of nowhere and therefore doesn't count. Split it. A portion toward something that brings you joy right now, a portion toward ownership. This isn't about guilt. It's about training your brain to see money in 2 categories instead of 1, spend and invest, rather than the old single category most of us were raised with, spend and save. And finally, revisit your relationship with the word rich itself. For a lot of women, rich has quietly meant looking a certain way, curated, polished, effortless. But actual richness, the kind that survives a recession, a breakup, a layoff, a health scare, looks almost boring from the outside. It looks like automatic transfers nobody sees. It looks like a retirement account that's been growing untouched for a decade. It looks like a woman who can absorb a financial shock without her entire life collapsing, because somewhere along the way, she stopped only protecting her money and started letting it own a piece of the world.